Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting this Wednesday, the 3rd of December. I am Councillor Neil Sanderson, Chair of the committee. This meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube website. You're asked, therefore, if you will use the buttons on your desk when you wish to indicate to speak. To begin with, I do have to say the following. There is no fire drill booked for this evening in this building. And if the fire alarm does sound, then please can I ask you to make your way to the building, down the main staircase and out the main doors of the town hall, and congregate by the entrance of Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give you instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. If, however, you have a disability or mobility problem, then please indicate and we will get a superintendent or a member of staff to assist you out of the building. Thank you. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 5th of November. Members in favour of those minutes? Thank you. Second item of apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Karadia, Russell and Srivastafa.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Under item non-pecuniary interests. Councillor Simpson-Vince.
Thank you. R250486, Borough Councillor.
Councillor Sam Edwards.
R240986, Ward Councillor.
Councillor Gillies.
R241166 as a Ward Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, I also have to declare an interest on item R24/0986. I was one of the councillors who originally called this into committee 2 years ago, but because I did do that call in, I would be vacating the chair, and that item was dealt with by Councillor Tony Freeman as vice chair. I will take no part in the vote on that item. Right, pecuniary interests. No. Non-pecuniary interests under Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Thank you. And now we move to item 4, applications for consideration, which I shall now vacate the chamber.
Good evening. I'm Tony Freeman. I'm Vice Chair of this Planning Committee. I will be chairing the meeting for the duration of consideration of application R240986, which is the erection of 34 apartments at the former Rugby Gym Club site at 90 Lower Hill Morton Road. We have a number of speakers, so the order of business will be the officer will present the scheme. We will then move on to the speakers. There will then be time for technical questions and clarifications, and then we'll move on to the debate. I see we have a number of members of the public in. It's just a reminder that while they may observe, they cannot participate in the meeting. Right, Mr. Yes. Smith.
Can everyone hear me all right? And good evening, everyone else. I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name's Dan Smith, and I'm a Principal Planning Officer in Planning Services. It's my first committee. So the application that you see before you on the screen there is a scheme for the erection of 34 apartments, the formation of a new vehicular access from Caldecott Place, and the associated development that you see there in front of you, and that's at the former gym club on Lower Hill Morton Road. Members had a site visit today, but for the benefit of anyone who wasn't able to attend, I'll just run through a few images of the site. This one is looking at the frontage of the site on Lower Hill Morton Road, as it currently is, following the demolition of the buildings on site. This photo shows that same viewpoint prior to the demolition of the former industrial buildings. This is a view of the historic vehicular access point onto Lower Hill Morton Road, again pre-demolition. It's worth noting that this is the vehicle access that would be closed up as part of the proposals. Here you have a view of the rear of the site looking north along the cul-de-sac of Caldecott Place, showing the buildings prior to demolition and the car parking area there. And this is the current view from Caldecott Street along Caldecott Place towards the site. And for members' benefit, the birch tree that you can see in the centre of the frame there is the tree that would be removed to make way for the new vehicle access. So that just gives you some idea of where that's going in on Caldecott Place. So site plan showing the proposals. You've got Lower Hill Morton Road to the north with Block A fronting that road, stepping back along the frontage. Block B runs north-south on the rear portion of the site, backs onto the line of lime trees that you can see there, which are off-site, and that's along the eastern boundary with the Great Central Walk Greenway, and that block faces out over the proposed car parking court, which is accessed by the new vehicle access that's annotated there off Caldecott Place. So the detail of the proposals for Block A, you've got front elevations there with the taller of the two buildings adjacent to the greenway, stepping down in height along the frontage towards the existing houses, which are shown in white. And Block B to the rear, with the two larger blocks in the centre of the site, stepping down again to the smaller block at the southern end, where it's adjacent to existing homes on Caldecott Place. The CGI image there just gives you a sense of the architectural style of those buildings. I don't know how well this shows up on the screen, but these are two plans. The right-hand side there showing the cycle stores in the northeast corner. The left-hand side, you've got with the parking area, the parking court of Caldecott Place, and then in the left-hand image, a series of pedestrian crossings which are proposed to be delivered, as well as the double yellow lines that would be provided around the junction of Caldecott Street and Caldecott Place. So the key planning considerations, as you can see there, are the principle of development in terms of its location, the housing supply situation and the housing mix, the layout scale and design of the development, its impact on trees, its landscaping and impact on ecology, highway safety and parking, flood risk and drainage, and then matters of viability, affordable housing and infrastructure. In respect of the principle of development, the site is within the urban area of Rugby, which is the most sustainable location in the borough, and which the local plan makes the primary focus for development. As a former industrial site, the site is considered brownfield, and the scheme would therefore be the redevelopment of a brownfield site. The gym club, which was previously run at the site and was considered to be a sports club use in terms of local plan policy, has already been relocated to new facilities at Rugby Borough Football Club. The scheme is proposed to be market housing only, so no affordable housing, and that's on viability grounds. It proposes almost entirely 2-bedroom flats with one single-bedroom flat, and that is not in accordance with the recommended mix, but that's justified by the accessible and very sustainable location of the site. And just to remind members that the council can't currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore significant weight should be given to the fact that the scheme will contribute towards much needed housing in the borough. So the scheme is considered to comply with the policies that you can see there that govern the principle of the development, subject to detailed considerations, which I will come on to. Just able to bear with me for a second, Chair, sorry. Sorry about that, everyone. Right, so moving first to the layout scale and the design of the development. As you can see on the plan layout on screen, Block A fronts Lower Hill Morton Road. And it steps back along the frontage in a similar fashion to the way the previous industrial buildings were. The layout provides an appropriate street frontage and level of enclosure to Lower Hill Morton Road, and also allows for the front garden areas and street landscaping. The scale of the buildings is similar to those in the immediate vicinity, in particular the block on the corner of St Peter's Road, just to the east, and steps down towards the neighbouring homes on Lower Hill Morton Road. The buildings are designed in a Victorian style to reflect the character of the immediate surroundings and are considered to be attractively detailed. Block B provides slightly lower buildings in a more contemporary design, which step down towards the rear of the site and reflect the more modern architecture found on Caldecott Place. The car parking site is in a location previously given over to parking and vehicle movements related to historic uses of the site, and there would be a new access to the parking court off Caldecott Place, and pedestrian and cycle access to Lower Hill Morton Road is retained. In summary, the scale, layout and design of the scheme is considered to be an appropriate contextual response and would result in a high quality, attractive development. In terms of the existing trees on or close to the site, as I said, the birch on Caldecott Place would be removed and will be compensated for by new planting on the site frontage and within the car parking court. The off-site lime trees along the boundary of the greenway would be protected during construction, and the trees officer is content in respect of the impact of the scheme on those trees. The new planting along the frontage would provide a tree-lined street, which is encouraged by policy, and would also provide softening of the buildings. The scheme would deliver a small increase in biodiversity on what is a barren site from that point of view at the moment, and would not impact on the Great Central Walk Local Nature Reserve, and the county ecologist is content with the proposals. In respect of highway safety, the Highways Authority initially expressed concern in respect of potential off-site impacts of the development and requested the applicant undertake a road safety audit with particular reference to the safety of the use of Caldecott Place to provide vehicle access, given existing problematic parking at its junction with Caldecott Street, as well as potential impacts on Lower Hill Morton Road. The submitted RSA has resulted in several proposals, including the provision of double yellow lines on Caldecott Place, a pedestrian crossing point on Caldecott Street, and further crossings on Lower Hill Morton Road. On that basis, the Highways Authority is content that the new access via Caldecott Place would not harm highway safety, and the proposed development provides for adequate pedestrian connectivity. The provision of those highways works would be secured by condition 10 on the draft decision notice. In respect of parking, the provision of double yellow lines restricting parking will result in a displacement of cars which usually park in that area. Based on my own visits to the site in the late evening, this is usually 5 or 6 vehicles, and that is confirmed by public representations that have been on the application. And these are often parked obstructing pavements. These vehicles would have to be parked elsewhere on surrounding streets, and while this may cause some inconvenience to owners who may have to park further from their properties, in officers' view, this is not considered likely to result in significant harm to the amenity of existing residents and would, in any event, address the current unsafe parking in the vicinity of the junction. The scheme itself provides 37 car parking spaces on site and adequate turning and manoeuvring space to allow safe access and egress. As the site is close to but outside the high access zone, the council's parking standards indicate that 1.5 spaces per dwelling, or 51 spaces total, should be provided. Officers have given consideration to the level of parking proposed and whether it is likely to meet the anticipated needs of the development. While the site is not within the high access zone, it is approximately 150 metres from its boundary, which runs along Temple Street to the west. Given the proximity of the site to the high access zone and the fact that future residents would benefit from similar ease of access to services and facilities, including by public transport, walking and cycling, it's considered reasonable to accept a lower level of parking provision than would ordinarily be required outside of the high access zone. The scheme makes a provision of 1 space per dwelling, plus 3 visitor spaces, which equates to 1.1 spaces per dwelling, a provision which sits between the requirements inside and outside of the high access zone, which are 0.75 spaces inside and 1.5 spaces outside. Given the sustainable location of the site, close to services and facilities, it's considered that the proposed parking provision is acceptable. Notwithstanding that conclusion, should any additional on-street parking demand result from the development, it is considered unlikely that this would be at a level that would cause significant impacts on the amenity of other residents. However, to mitigate any potential harm, the Highways Authority suggested a condition be applied requiring comparative parking surveys to be carried out to monitor levels of on-street parking in the vicinity. Were those surveys to identify problematic levels of on-street parking post-occupation, this mechanism will allow for a mitigation scheme to be implemented, such as a scheme for further parking restrictions or permitting. This safety net is considered to adequately mitigate the potential impact of additional on-street parking demand from the development, and the Highways Authority makes no objection on the basis of any impact on highway safety. On that basis, the proposed development is considered to provide an acceptable level of parking, given the type of property and its location, subject to conditions. On flood risk and drainage, the site's located in flood zone 1, meaning it's at the lowest level of risk in terms of river flooding. The area of the site proposed for car parking is at a very low risk of surface water flooding. However, this has been accounted for in the design of the surface water drainage scheme. As the site is unsuitable for infiltration drainage due to ground conditions and space constraints, SUDS features are not proposed, and the drainage would instead be provided for via crates under the car parking area, which would slow discharge rates to an acceptable level before being discharged into the public sewer. The lead local flood authority and Severn Trent Water have confirmed that that is acceptable to them, subject to conditions requiring detailed drainage proposals. So moving on to affordable housing and infrastructure, policy H2 of the local plan states that a target of affordable housing provision of 20% will be sought on brownfield sites. Schemes are also expected to mitigate their impact on infrastructure, such as education, and provide new or contribute towards enhancement of existing public open space. However, a financial appraisal for the scheme has been submitted which indicates that the scheme would not be viable were it to provide affordable housing and infrastructure contributions. The National Planning Policy Framework allows for viability assessments to be submitted and considered, and the viability of a scheme is a material consideration in its determination. Policy H2 also envisages circumstances where reduced provision may be justified via independent assessment of financial viability evidence. The Council has had the submitted viability appraisal independently assessed, and the conclusion of that assessment is that the scheme would not be viable where affordable housing or contributions required. The Council's assessment concludes that even a fully market scheme with no contributions falls below the accepted level of viability by providing a 13.8% profit. This is below the lower end of a viable profit margin, which is usually understood to be 15 to 20%. On that basis, the application has demonstrated that it is not viable to provide affordable housing or contributions to other infrastructure. In respect of affordable housing, as the application has demonstrated a lack of viability, it is considered that it complies with policy H2, despite the lack of provision. In respect of the other infrastructure, the application does not meet the requirements of policy, and this is therefore considered to cause some harm. That harm has been weighed in the planning balance. The Council's assessor has sensitivity tested the viability appraisal, and this shows that sales values are unlikely to increase sufficiently in the short term to result in an improvement in the viability of the scheme. In lieu of a late-stage viability review, the applicant has agreed to a significantly shortened implementation period of 18 months, as opposed to the usual 3 years, which would ensure the speedy delivery of the scheme and limit any potential changes in viability over time. The scheme is considered acceptable in respect of the need to re-provide the sports facility, which has already been achieved, and in its impact on existing neighbours and future occupants. The air quality impacts and mitigation of contamination are considered acceptable, and the scheme would comply with requirements regarding climate change and sustainable development. There are no significant heritage impacts, and the applicant has committed to providing connectivity to broadband networks. So turning to planning balance, the current lack of a 5-year supply means the application must be assessed under what is known as the tilted balance, i.e. approving the permission unless any adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The benefits of the scheme are considered to be the delivery of 34 new homes, which would assist with the current shortfall, the economic benefits of construction jobs and spend locally and the benefit on the local economy, and the environmental benefits of redevelopment of a brownfield site. The adverse impacts are considered to be the lack of mitigation of the impact of the scheme on local infrastructure, such as schools, libraries, and open space. The conclusion of the balancing exercise is that the adverse impacts are not sufficient, that they outweigh the benefits, and the recommendation of officers is therefore that the application be approved subject to the conditions set out in the draft decision and as amended by the addendum update, which I believe members have been provided, as well as the usual request for delegated authority to make minor amendments to the final conditions and informatives. I'm happy to answer any questions members may have in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We have 3 speakers this evening. I'll just check that I've got them correctly identified. Kerry Dunn. Yes. Ian Gidley. Yep. And Councillor Trimble. Yeah, okay. The format for this is you get 3 minutes to speak. An officer will signal when you've reached 2.5 minutes, which gives you a chance to wrap up within 30 seconds or so. just another reminder, as I noticed more members of the public came in, only speakers, members and officers may speak or participate. So contributions from the gallery will not be welcome. We'll take Kerry Dunn first, who is an objector. You need to switch on the microphone, speak into that so members can hear you.
Sure.
Well, because there's going to be a few. Yeah. Are you ready?
Are we good?
Have you got your microphone?
It says yes. Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm a resident in the area. I live at 78 Lower Hill Morton Road, which is the Victorian semi-detached, which is right next to the site. I speak on behalf of residents in Lower Hill Morton Road, Caldecott Street and Caldecott Place in opposition to the plans. It's our main issues with the plans include parking. We don't feel that the allocated spaces are going to adequately provide for the flats there. Traditionally, our roads are close knit Victorian roads where parking already is at a premium. I live on Lower Hill Morton Road. There are no parking restrictions there. We are a two-car family, which I think is quite normal in the area, and we struggle to even park on Lower Hill Morton Road at all. And I know that people in Caldecott Street and Caldecott Place have problems as well. I know in relation to, visits to the area and stuff like that, 6 vehicles overnight in Caldecott Place has been noted, but for us, all these vehicles are displaced. People in Caldecott Place cannot park in Caldecott Place now. If you put yellow lines there, they're going to be displaced into Caldecott Street. Caldecott Street is already being displaced into Lower Hill Morton Road, and we don't have anywhere to park. So for us, we have to travel around the local side streets just to be able to park now. So we don't feel that a development of this size is going to work in that location. We also point to the fact that St Peter's Road flats that are nearby are a good example of one already that isn't working, and that has even more allocated parking spaces than this particular one will. And down there, people are parked on the curbs, they're parked on the road. There just isn't anywhere to park. So that's kind of our main issues. Access as well. Caldecott Place is tight now. We don't feel that, having multiple occupancy flats is going to work there. And I'd also point to the profit margin of this development to say that I think that this needs to be reviewed should this go through, because I don't believe that a developer will go ahead just for a 13.8% profit. I don't believe that, and there's no contribution to social housing or local facilities.
Thank you. We have a second speaker, Ian Gidley. I believe you're the agent for the developers. Is that correct? And you'll be speaking in favour of the application. Okay, again, it's 3 minutes. The officer will signal when you've got 30 seconds to go. Please proceed.
Okay. Good evening. The committee meeting tonight is the culmination of over 2 years of work on this proposal, which started as a pre-app in November 2023. It was agreed at the outset that it must be a design-led scheme. The proposed apartments facing Lower Hill Morton Road reflect both local Victorian vernacular and the staggered gabled form of the original buildings. They appear as traditional Victorian semi-detached villas in the street scene. The rear of the site demanded a more modern design, given the housing at Caldecott Place, yet high-quality materials are still proposed and incorporate projecting brick piers that were a feature of the former Victorian factories. I'll try not to repeat the content of the officer's report, but just add further information. I'm aware traffic and car parking is a particular local concern. Traffic has been assessed by highway consultants using typical trip generation rates. Overall, they demonstrate significant betterment compared to the former use, with 225 fewer trips over a 12-hour period. In terms of car parking, the site is just outside the defined high access area where reduced parking standards apply, but it has the same accessibility as Temple Street in the zone 1 street along. The town centre is within walking distance, and there is a convenient and frequent bus service. It is also clear from census data that town apartments typically have low car ownership, with over 60% of households having no car in some cases. 37 car parking and 37 bike spaces strikes the right balance and encourages cycling. Existing problems of inconsiderate parking will be resolved by the double yellow lines proposed. Pedestrian safety will be significantly enhanced through the crossings proposed, which are currently absent, an additional benefit of the scheme. The plans have now been revised to include car parking charging points for every apartment. On concerns re drainage, the significant increase in green areas upon current conditions will create a betterment, and the engineer's report proposes underground tanks to prevent flooding. It is regrettable that the scheme is barely viable and therefore cannot make any financial contributions. I'm happy to answer questions on that. However, to add some context, the applicant did write to all housing associations, but none wanted apartments in Rugby. We're still looking at this and exploring grant options outside of the planning process. In terms of education, the county agreed no contributions were required for primary schools, and on secondary schools there is ample capacity in Rugby Free and Ashlawn School, and the county was unable to identify any specific improvements to be funded. Census data also suggests apartments in Rugby generate very few, if any, school-aged children. So while social infrastructure is important in the planning balance, the proposals have nominal impact, and thus the benefits of reuse in brownfield land for desperately needed small site units, especially in the rental sector, and 200% biodiversity net gain far outweigh any constraints. Overall, together with the landscaping scheme, the proposed development will create a set of high-quality, attractive apartments and a pleasant place to live that significantly enhances the local environment with added bonus of several pedestrian crossings. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a third and final speaker, which is Councillor Trimble, who is the ward councillor. Same rules, 3 minutes. The officer will signal when you've got 30 seconds left. Please proceed.
Oh, sorry.
Good evening. This is a letter from one of my constituents who lives in Caldicott Street. I said I'd read it out. 1. Currently, the street is so congested for parking. Caldicott Place is necessary to park. It is not merely nice to have. In some cases, there are up to 3 cars per household, which makes it almost impossible for someone with 1 car to park. This is not helped by the recent addition of another disabled bay on the road. The removal of Caldicott Place parking may mean parking streets away and walking up to 10 minutes home. This would be totally unacceptable. The Planning Committee document refers to the impact of the removal of Caldicott Place parking as relatively low, and the harm caused by this inconvenience is considered to be outweighed by the benefit resulting from the removal of a parking practice WCC Highways considers unsafe. This is totally misjudged. I would ask the Planning Committee how they would feel as a woman on their own walking home at 6:30 p.m. on a winter's night in the dark, having to park 2 streets away and walk 10 minutes home, possibly with shopping. This is more than inconvenience. They have not considered this on an individual basis. 2. I run a tutoring business from home. The lack of parking in the street is likely to negatively impact my business, as parents will need to park between the hours of 3:30 and 6:30. This is when the street is becoming congested as people return home from work. 3. The proposed entrance to the development is directly opposite my house. This will result in a massive increase in traffic in and out, right opposite my living room window. At night, this light pollution is likely to have a severely negative impact. An entrance on Lower Hillmorton Road is clearly more logical and is where the previous entrance to the site was. This would also alleviate the problem of removing the overflow parking on Caldicott Place. 4. Building works are likely to have a severe impact both on noise levels and general congestion in the street, again impacting on my business and the general accessibility of current residents. 5. The development is likely to have a negative impact on the value of houses in Caldicott Street, particularly mine, as it is directly opposite the proposed entrance. Please note I've never received any information through the door about this development.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Councillor Trimble, you were reading from representations made to you by residents when you refer to mine and so on. It was on their behalf, was it not? Well, thank you. We'll move on now to technical and other clarifications. Questions from committee to the officer. Who would like to kick off? Councillor Lawrence.
Just want to ask some questions around the viability and the fact there'll be no late stage viability. For me, if the development is only just viable now, if I was a developer, I wouldn't be in a hurry to develop this site. I would perhaps develop it several years in time when our viability could change. So could you explain why there would be no viability check with that if that occurred?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Lawrence. I think the late stage viability reviews are an option for authorities and applicants where there is a reasonable prospect that over the life of a development that the viability of a scheme may change, so say significant fall in construction costs or other costs or an increase in sales values. The assessment that the council's commissioned indicates that over the life of a normal permission, it's unlikely that the market is going to change significantly either in terms of sales values or construction costs for the development to become so viable that it would be able to make contributions. And we considered the application of a late stage viability review. It's a relatively small scheme to take that approach on as a starting point. It would also require legal agreements, which would be an additional cost and an additional delay. And as an alternative to that, the council considered that limiting the permission to an 18-month permission, so commencing within 18 months, would further mitigate any likelihood that the scheme was likely to become more profitable over the course of its life. And the applicant was willing, I'm told by the agent, is very keen to just get on site and start building these. They've got a significant investment financially in the land at the moment, and they want to get this scheme built and get whatever they can out of it and move on. So for that reason, and also because the council is clearly in need of housing supply, an 18-month permission as opposed to viability appraisal, late stage viability appraisal was considered appropriate. Why a developer would build when there's limited viability, I guess there are sunk costs at the moment. They've acquired the site. There is some profit to be made. It's limited. It's below the level that one would normally expect, given the risks that are involved in investing further in the site. And they're only likely to realise any profit on the sale of the last 2 or 3 units. But my understanding is that they're keen to get on and build these. Obviously, a short permission is more likely to achieve that. Their alternative to developing them quickly would be to let the permission lapse, but you would end up in the same situation as if you didn't grant permission. So I hope that explains a little bit.
Councillor Picker.
Can I just go back to this viability issue, because I think it is one of the key issues. So condition 1 is the one that we've imposed for essentially halving the time they have to implement the permission. However, implementation can actually be, as I understand it, a very low bar to clear, in that it can just involve putting in some foundational works. So the concern I have, because I've never come across a developer who said, oh yeah, maybe we'll develop it in the next couple of months, or maybe we'll leave it. They're always very keen at this stage. What happens, and is there any way that we can mitigate against a potential sort of early stage implementation that then doesn't go any further for a little bit, and then all of a sudden the market picks up in 2-3 years, however long it is, and then all of a sudden it would have been viable? Can I have some advice from either the officer or others on whether we can mitigate that?
I think I would say there is always that risk with any development, that yes, the bar for implementation is relatively low. As you say, an example that you cited of putting foundations in, there are various others, which would mean that effectively the permission is established. I think in general that it, in my experience, doesn't happen that often, because there are costs associated with holding the site, which mean that it's in a landowner or a developer's interest to build out. I mean, I'm not an expert on market conditions, but our viability assessor also took the view that for the foreseeable future, there is unlikely to be a significant change in circumstances. So that would really require the developer to hold on to the site for probably a period which would cause, normally cause any application to lapse. If they'd implemented it, they could obviously hold on to it, but I think I don't see the risk being any greater on this site than it would be anywhere else, and I think it's actually probably less likely, given the conversations that I've had with the agent about the developer's intention. I appreciate what you say. Developers are always keen to get going when they're waiting for permission. I accept that. But I believe that that commitment has been made in good faith, and I can't really kind of add much more than that.
The other thing I'd add, actually, Chair, is that also in order to commence development, they have to have dealt with all the pre-commencement conditions as well. So that's an additional cost to the developer. So that also would show their intention within that time frame. Also to pick up, and I appreciate this is outside the planning process, a speaker did mention it, but I can also confirm if this gives you an indication of their intention. The agent speaker did mention about trying to access additional sources of funding. We all have an understanding that the West Midlands Combined Authority are also looking at this particular site in potential source of funding. I appreciate it's outside of planning, but I just thought I'd mention that, because obviously that in itself would obviously come with various caveats as well.
Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Chair. Got two questions. On the parking spaces of 37, I know we've talked about this when we're on site, but I want to make sure people understand. What parking surveys were done around the Caldicott Place, Caldicott Street, Low Hill, Horton Road, so they can take the extra. So if you're making a decision, I know it's only 2 streets away, but we have to have a line somewhere. So what I want to know is what sort of provisions have gone to get that information so you can actually put extra parking there. That's the first question. The second question is, we had an issue down at the cattle market when the builders went bust. And obviously we are still suffering with the parking down there anyway. So for me personally, I'm very concerned. So what happens, anything happens, because it's not a big contingency plan. So if any unforeseen circumstance comes up, what sort of backup we have? Because we don't want a half-built site on our hands to people, especially people of the streets, to look at. So they're the 2 questions I've got. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Harrington. I think if I take the second question first, I understand my understanding of your question is you're asking what happens if, is it potentially because the margins are relatively tight? What happens if the developer goes
I've
under?
got concerns because it's the margin's so tight. I don't know what the contingency plan is and things like that, and we don't want to go down the same route when we had down around the Cattle Market when half of it was built, and it waited so long to get someone to finish it off. We don't want to go. We need to learn the lessons from that, so we have this for the future. So I don't know what contingency we've got for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's difficult. I don't think there is an obvious way of mitigating that risk. I think it is a risk developing at the moment that that margins are tight. I can't speak to the wider financial position of the developer and to the level of funds that they have available to ensure that development's completed. I don't. There is obviously profit in the scheme, not sufficient that it would be technically viable and therefore able to make other contributions, but there is a level of profit that will hopefully come out of the scheme there. But I don't think there's an obvious answer to that problem, and it obviously does happen that developments aren't completed for that reason. Your first question, I think, was about the level of survey that's been done of the parking situation to date. I don't think there's been a specific kind of street by street survey. I think it is well known that parking is in demand, and I think I've been to the site myself a couple of times later into the evening, and I've seen the level of parking around there, particularly on Caldecott Street and Caldecott Place. And the County Council is obviously, based on its responses, aware of the premium that is on parking there at the moment. And notwithstanding that, they're saying that they don't believe any highway safety impacts will result from any displaced parking or any overspill parking. And like you said, there has to be a line somewhere in respect of the high access zone and not. I think we do have a responsibility to consider that carefully. If you've got a parking standard which is 1.5 spaces for the rest of the borough, I would say my own view on that is that this site is obviously much more sustainable than many other locations in the borough where the same headline parking provision requirement would apply, and I think there's good reason to lower it in this case. But that is something that members will have to weigh up, and then depending on what level of harm they conclude, they will need to weigh that on the tilted balance.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if there's a construction phase plan at all, because I've got concerns about the adopted road in Caldecott Place, really. And if the plan was to bring the construction traffic in that way, or are they leaving a gap at the original entrance on Low Hill Moreton Road and sort of working the way out, really, because 2 years of construction traffic going down that road, that adopted road, and I had concerns about that road today when we looked at it. There was a lot of, seemed to be deep drainage below there as well, really, so I was worried about sort of 32-ton concrete wagons going down a very small road.
Thank you for the question. You just bear with me for a second while I check something.
Okay, the officers are just checking that point. We think it's within the paper, but we'll just confirm in a moment.
If there's any tweaks to that, we can make them.
Sorry for the delay. Yeah, condition 4 on the draft decision notice does require the submission of a construction management plan. I don't think we've specifically referred to construction traffic in that, but we can obviously tweak that to do that if that would allay members' concerns on which access is used and how the scheme is phased. There isn't a phasing plan at the moment. I understand that the scheme is likely to be brought forward as a whole rather than, you know, over a number of staged phases, because it very much would operate as a single site as opposed to a much larger site where you would expect a phasing plan. But we can, yeah, if that's something that members are keen for us to secure, we can make sure we do that as part of the Kemp.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Edwards.
So, went on the site visit earlier, and I just wanted to clarify regarding the egress onto Lower Hillmorton Road, which the site formerly allowed for. One, why is that not happening this time? And secondly, if it was deemed appropriate because of the traffic and parking problems that there clearly are, for a change to occur so that there was egress, would the developer consider that?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Edwards. I think I wasn't around for the pre-app when that was done, and not even for the start of the current application, so I can't speak definitively on the reasons why the access that's there at the moment was proposed not to be retained. I imagine it's a design decision. I think it's probably to do with the layout of the site and achieving both a level of enclosure on that frontage from a design point of view, and also the provision of the blocks of development that makes the most sense in terms of layout. But yeah, as far as an alternative scheme, I think my advice to members would be that members need to consider the scheme that's in front of them. It's difficult to consider a scheme in the abstract as to whether or not a viable design-led kind of attractive scheme could be provided with the access retained onto Lower Hillmorton Road. In my view, there's a scheme in front of members which is acceptable, and I'm not really in a position to kind of advise on an alternative scheme in the abstract.
Councillor Simpson-Vince.
Thank you. I'll stay away from the viability question because we've had a lot of those and I'm sure it will come up in debate. Mine's around children and schools. 2-bedroom flats, they're all 2-bedroom flats. There's going to be children in those flats, probably quite young children, and therefore I'm surprised that there's nothing about schools that County Council aren't requesting a school contribution, because they will be taking primary school places. Sorry, the speaker had said that it was just secondary, but that there wasn't a provision and there was plenty of spaces. I think the schools around there might disagree. And also, if you've then got children in 2-bedroom apartments, by definition in this day and age, you've got 2 cars, because someone's doing school runs and nursery runs, and anyone that's had to ever deal with a car seat, you need a decent-sized car park space, which then means if you haven't got it within your parking block, you're going to park your car somewhere else, probably on the road, because that's where it's easier to open doors. This is just having negotiated car seats and schools and nurseries and everything. It's just one of those things that this sort of jumps out as 2-bedroom flats, no children. 2-bedroom flats, there are going to be children. So it's obviously not something that the developer seems to think is going to happen, or county seems to happen, but I think we've done enough planning applications sat here to know that it's things like that can kind of cause the tensions and cause the problems going forward. And I just wonder how comfortable you are that has all been accounted for with this. And a separate point sort of related to that is the entry to the car park going to have gates or barriers or something to just control who comes in and out and who uses those spaces? Oh, and thank you for your report. I know it's your first time and you're getting a bit of a grilling from us all, but thank you for your report.
Don't apologise, it's the best day of the month for me, sad as I am. Yeah, so far. In terms of your last question on barriers, there's no barrier proposed at the moment. There would be a car park management plan which would come forward under condition. So it's one requirement of condition on the permission that the county council have suggested, which would deal with allocation of spaces and which spaces were visitor spaces and those sorts of things to make sure that that was retained in the long run. On financial contributions, Warwickshire County Council did seek financial contributions towards education provision. That is covered in my report, paragraph 21, 25, and on for a couple, about £200,000 contribution was requested to mitigate the impact on secondary provision and additional primary and secondary SEN provision in the local area. So that is the main of the additional contributions over and above the affordable housing issue. The education contribution is the vast majority of the financial contributions which would not be provided based on viability, if you see what I mean. So I think about 200,000 out of about 220. The rest being contributions to public open space enhancement. So I hope that answers on that. And then on your point on potential occupants and their potential car use, I take your point. I can't foresee exactly who's going to occupy flats, obviously. We have to take a kind of a pragmatic view as officers as to whether or not we think sufficient parking provision is provided, and if not, the potential impacts and how serious they are. And you have my recommendation on that, but I appreciate that, you know, certain members may take a different view.
Councillor Edwards, and then I have a question from the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. On point 19.3, it says about a geotechnical investigation and contamination assessment. Laboratory testing of the samples of soil have taken place and found elevated levels of mercury and several hydrocarbons. And it concludes that these pollutants would have the potential to be harmful to the health of future occupiers. So it goes on to recommend remediation, including importing a layer of inert topsoil. If it comes back that continues to be an issue, at what point in time will it be deemed not safe for residents?
So the way that the remediation of contamination usually works is that you would do spot testing or trench testing of existing parts of the site. That would give you an idea of what's in the ground, if there's anything that needs to be remediated, and then you would come up with a remediation strategy with how to deal with that. So a detailed strategy about whether you're going to scrape the site and import, or whether you're going to remove significant amount of earth, or whether you can cap it and then import topsoil, which is the proposal in this case. So a membrane barrier underneath topsoil to effectively cut off those pollutant linkages. That, based on the submitted assessment and the council's environmental health team advice, that is considered to be sufficient to mitigate the impact. There is then a requirement for post-remediation verification report to be submitted, which effectively verifies that the remediation has been carried out as per the specification and been successful in cutting off that pollutant linkage with residents. So that's how that would be dealt with, and that's covered in conditions on the draft decision.
Thank you. My question also concerns parking. This seems to be exercising quite a number of members and speakers. There's 37 allocated spaces on site for residents and visitors. So that's 34 for the residents and 3 for visitors. Are these spaces to be allocated individually, or would it be a free-for-all?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yeah, as I think I was getting to with Councillor Simpson-Vince's question, there is a condition proposed to be applied to the permission which would require car park management plans, so that would detail the allocation of spaces. It is our intention, and we've discussed this with the applicant's agent, that each flat should be allocated a single space, and then there would be 3 visitor spaces left over. The council's parking standards don't require any visitor spaces to be provided, so in a sense that's additional, albeit that the provision is lower than the 1.5, because visitor spaces are kind of just the parking ratio includes the provision of visitor spaces. In this case, we think it's most suitable for flats to be allocated at a single space each, accepting that most people are going to have a car, and that the 3 visitor spaces would also be marked as that, and that the car park would be managed to ensure that.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on clarification, technical matters? Okay. We were sort of straying into debate with some of the way the questions were phrased, but now for the debate. Who would like to start us off? Councillor Gillias.
Thanks for that. I'd really like to start by see if we can get into the minutes the description of this site. I wouldn't like to think it would go down in history as the former gym club, because we know it's got a long history. It's taught lots of people in the electrical and trade. It's been a technical college for electrical contractors, and I know there are still 2 of them still working in this town today, taught there, but it was closed in 1971, I do believe. But before that, it was very, very prominent in the motor car industry, making sparking plugs, Lodge sparking plugs. The business was set up by Sir Oliver Lodge in 1913. And a lot of those spark plugs were made and went into racing motorcycles and won world championships by people like Mike Halewood and John Surtees and all that sort of thing. But let's get back to the real crux of the matter now, because clearly we've got... but I do hope all that appears in the minutes, because this is the history of our town. This is the history of our town, and all I saw today was a heap of rubble, what's left of it. So... we had a look, and I did make mention to the officer, the very, very mature trees growing on the edge of the site, on the embankment of the old railway line. I think they pose a danger to any building there or any person living in those buildings, and I'd like to see some sort of informative to mitigate or do some pollarding work on the trees to make them safe for the future, because we all know those trees will fall down one day, and they don't want to be falling on those properties or people that live in them. But there is a parking issue, isn't there? Because the evidence I see, I don't see people getting out of their cars and going to work on their bike. I see them going onto their bikes to enjoyment, and recreation, but not to go to work. So people love their cars, and I do think there's a problem regarding parking. We've seen it on 1 or 2 other sites in the borough, and we just don't want to be repeating things. But that's just... my point of view. I'd like to hear comments from others first.
Well, thank you for the... Councillor Gillias is the Planning Committee's historian archivist, so we usually get some historical context when he attends. Councillor Harrington.
Every day's a school day, isn't it? Just want to... I've looked at this, and I'm really concerned. Parking, I mean, that's all I've been doing for the past 3.5, 4 years as a councillor. But I think the issue you've got is, for me, is we've had this issue down by the train station, when we said minimum parking, then we left it all go to pot, and we are suffering now. So for me, I don't think it's good enough, personally. If we've got a standard, we need to stick to it. What's the point in having rules when we're just going to break them? Secondly, I think the issue you've got is there's no social houses. We are desperate for them. We are desperate for them because this is going to help with cost of living, because people can have affordable rents to have houses. And it's another application which hasn't got any. And we set 20% requirement, and we're nowhere near it. So for me personally, from that, them two as well, and also the mixture, it's all 2 bedroomed. We need 1 bedroom as well, and the mix isn't right. So for the moment, I will let it go down to discussion at the moment, but I'm really concerned of that. And also the last bit as well, the infrastructure. If we're inviting people into Rugby to invest in Rugby, and invest in properties and things like that, and we welcome developers, no problems at all, you've got to pay your way. And unfortunately, I don't see there's nothing being paid here. We've got nothing to reinvest into Rugby to make it better. And I feel this is the wrong thing to do. So at the moment, I am going to let the debate go, but they are my concerns, and they are quite strong. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, just for clarity, the proposal has 33 2-bedroom flats and 1 1-bedroom flat. And the applicable parking standard suggests that we'd need 51 parking spaces. Is that correct? Any further contributions to debate?
Yeah,
Vince, and then Councillor Ian Picker.
I've pushed the button to say yes, I'm going to talk, and now I've got to think about what I'm going to say, because there's like awkward silence otherwise. I agree. I think there's a real concern around the viability. There's a real concern if you're building flats and your site isn't viable enough to do any affordable housing at all within that. And we have turned down applications fairly recently where we haven't had the affordable housing, and they've been bigger houses. I get that we deal with the application we've got in front of us, but I don't understand why Caldecott Place is the entry. I just can't. That doesn't make sense to me. And again, it's the mix. It's just, apart from one token 1-bedroom flat, they're all 2-bedroom flats. I don't know. It's not working for me. I'm really undecided on this one. Yeah, I'm going to let the discussion flow, assuming other people will be putting their hands up. But yeah, I've got concerns on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Picker, you had your hand up.
In many respects, I really hate this application, because this should be an absolute slam dunk. It is brownfield site, it's previous industrial development, it is in the most sustainable part of Rugby, it is exactly the type of area that we should be developing. And in many respects, and I know that throughout all the conversation, we've had no conversation about the principle of development, because it's clearly met. We've had no conversation about the on-site biodiversity, because it is clearly met. It is obviously an improvement on what is there at the moment. It is obviously an improvement on what was historically there. I know the site reasonably well, although I was never a member of either the gym club or the Sea Cadet Centre. Something about following orders just doesn't appeal to me. It is, it was a dreadful location, really, and the new gym club at Kilsby Lane is absolutely an incredible site. So this is exactly the kind of thing that we should be welcoming with open arms, and yet, in so many respects, it doesn't comply with policy D2. I appreciate everything the officer has said, and I think it is a very good report, but it fundamentally doesn't comply with policy D2. It is short on parking spaces, and we know what has happened, as others have said, where we have overlooked those issues in the past, and it's come back to bite us, and it's come back to bite other residents. We've had discussions about the cattle market site. Well, I live within walking distance of both this site and the cattle market site, it is a real problem. And the thing that amuses me is we have all these policies and, government motions and all of that say, oh, we should look to reduce the use of the private car, we should look to reduce the use of, or increase the use of public transport. Doesn't work. Nobody wants to do it. Everyone wants their own car. I'm sorry, that's the reality we face, and that is why we have these policies. It is... I think there are serious concerns about access. I know we've got a highways report that says otherwise, but you put double yellow lines down there, you're going to push the parking elsewhere, especially if we've got a shortfall of 14 spaces of what we say is acceptable. If you put another 14 cars in that area and double yellow lines, you're going to have a problem. And that's really bad, because I want to approve this. I really want to move approval on this, because it is exactly the kind of site we need to be bringing forward. But there are real problems with this scheme. Although I will just caution colleagues on the planning committee, we've spoken about viability. Statute says if it's got a viability report, the viability report's been independently assessed. That's it. Sorry, I don't like it, but that's statute.
Just to come back, thank you, Chair. Come back on a couple of points, because the cattle market site keeps raising its head, I've noticed in discussions. Now, the difference, I think, between that site and this site is, okay, part of that site, I think, is within the high access area. So there wasn't one parking space per flat, and I think that has caused some of the issues, because I think residents there can get a flat and then I think subsequently either rent or purchase a parking space if they choose, but they haven't necessarily been allocated, every flat there hasn't been allocated a parking space. And I think that is one of the big problems at that site. Obviously with this site, we have got parking for each flat that is proposed, and obviously then 3 additional visitor ones. Obviously the car park management scheme will then make sure that they are allocated accordingly. So I think that is a difference between those two sites. There is no question this is a challenging site. There has these, as the agent spoke earlier, this is a culmination of 2 years of work that has been going on between officers and the applicants. There's been many reiterations to try and satisfy the technical consultees and planning. Was mentioned to another scheme that obviously, yes, the committee refused on the grounds of a lack of affordable housing. I think it's the Barbie Lane one that people mentioned. That is currently at appeal. There's an application for full costs against the council because of that decision. Now, obviously, that's pending. It's down to the inspectorate to make that final decision. But the warning I will mention, or the point I'll mention, is that the top reason that councils get awarded costs is when they go against the highway authority and their advice. So that I just have to mention that point. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Harrington, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I agree parts what you said, but not everything, because this was said previously about cattle market development. Problem I've got is, where's Warwickshire County Council? Where's them here tonight? I've said this at previous meetings, and I'll keep saying it again. I can only go by what you've said to you. Oh, it's been approved, but where's the evidence? We haven't got any evidence here. And for me personally, I don't think that's good enough for Warwickshire County Council highways. Because if we're trying to make, as I said, I do agree with Councillor Picker, this should be a slam dunk. This should be done because it's brownfield site. That's it. But the problem is, there's no highways. So the problem is, we can't verify, or whatever data they give us, because I know they've done it previously when I had a HMO on Windsor Street. They had no parking surveys until I asked for it. So at the moment, I can't trust them as far as I can throw them, unfortunately. And I feel sorry for you planners, because I don't think you get enough detail of what's gone into the background. There's been a bit of debate here. I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to put on to propose it to refusal. It's not adhering to our policies, so it's not adhering to the social housing, parking positions, and also no contribution towards rugby and anything in the area. So I will propose for refusal for this application. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a proposal for refusal. Councillor Edwards, are you seconding?
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Well, I think one more bit of clarification from the planning officer, and then you can come back. Yeah, please.
Yeah, the 3 points I've got there are lack of affordable housing, lack of parking, and so the final thing was...
there's section 106 of them, there's no contribution.
I
want to come back to what you said. Can I just... before...
Sorry, Councillor.
Okay, if we can get the officer finish, and then you can come back.
The only word of caution I'll mention is on the affordable housing policy, because obviously it does comply with the affordable housing policy, because policy H2 specifically says, or has an element about on viability, and obviously as Councillor Picker has picked that point up. So I appreciate there isn't any affordable housing, but the policy does allow for a viability assessment to be made and to conclude that the scheme is acceptable, even if there's no affordable housing, if that's been independently assessed, and it has been independently assessed. So I don't know if that potentially, that advice changes your recommendation or not.
We could
very quickly. We've got Councillor Picker and Councillor Gillias have some points. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's D2 that we need to focus on. I think there's no sense in we can talk about viability all day, but fundamentally the applicant has complied with what they are required to do by statute. Check with the housing minister, but I cannot support a motion that includes viability or affordable housing, because that's not the right reason for refusal.
Councillor Gillias, please.
Well, I think we're heading in the right direction, but I don't think refusal is the right way to go. I think we ought to defer this to see whether things can be tweaked slightly, because if we go for refusal, and the refusal is approved by everybody, then of course it creates a long drawn-out process, and we've all agreed that the site needs developing. So I'm going to move deferral.
I think that was more a question than a motion. I think we need the case officer to clarify on that point.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I would just, I think if members are going to move to refuse this application, before they do that, I would want to be very clear that they are assessing this on the tilted balance as required by the MPPF in the light of the Council's lack of a 5-year supply. And as members will know, that does weight quite significantly towards approving, even where there are potentially some harms. And in order to refuse, members would need to be absolutely persuaded that the issue that they're refusing on, which based on what Councillor Picker said, I think is likely to be parking, significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefit of the scheme. Benefits in combination, one of which is very significant in as much as it provides housing to address the Council's shortage. So before members vote, I just want them to be persuaded on that point. As far as deferral is concerned, I would say there's a fully worked up scheme in front of members. If we're talking about deferring it to redesign to allow access off Lower Hill Morton Road, I would say that is a fundamental redesign, in my opinion. And I would also say there is a real tension here between the density of the scheme in order to make it viable at all in terms of being delivered, let alone viable in technical terms and providing a profit, where you might say, actually, what we need is more development. We need more value out of the site in order to make it contribute towards infrastructure and affordable housing. And yet we're also seemingly saying we want less because there's not enough parking. There's only so much can go onto that site, and you can't, I don't think, get more units or larger units. If you have larger units, your parking demand goes up because it's more for larger units, and also provide more space for parking. You're going to have to, you really have got to walk the line on that. And in my opinion, that's what this scheme does. So that's what I would say on that. And I've already cautioned members against trying to crystal ball a future scheme, so I'll resist doing that. But I will say I think it is difficult to envisage a scheme which is both viable to the extent that this one is, and also provides either fewer units or more parking.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more contributions to the debate? Councillor Harrington.
Due to viability, I think I'll take off the affordable housing, but everything else stands, I think. I think as planning committees, we need to be pushing developers for affordable housing, and I won't stop doing that. Also, the comment regarding if it goes to appeal, the residents don't have appeal tonight. If we accept it, it's gone. So if it goes to an inspectorate, at least they have a chance to appeal it, and they have a choice in this, and they can try and push it from there. So it's really torn me, but I think we would refuse it on regarding our regulations, so parking, and also no contribution to rugby. You should be spending the money in rugby. Thank you.
Okay, on the matter of parking, is your proposal to refuse on highway safety grounds or on the grounds of nuisance to the surrounding residents? There's a fine distinction there. If anyone wishes, I'm sure the officers would be happy to clarify.
Yeah, through you, Chair, you may remember last committee there was a discussion about the former doctor's surgery at Brownsover and the lack of parking there. And obviously there was a concern there on highway safety grounds because obviously there was no parking proposed specific. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. There were 5 spaces proposed on site, and then the rest was into the public car park area. Obviously, in the case of this, I think a lot of the concern doesn't seem to be about highway safety. It seems to be about the lack of provision of parking, which obviously is a different element. The issue I've raised obviously before is that obviously the Highway Authority has said there isn't a highway safety concern, and that obviously they are the technical experts. I appreciate they're not here tonight, but they did request a road safety audit. That was done because they did raise concerns initially themselves, and they have now said that they are happy from a highway safety point of view. So it's just really getting clarity here about, you know, what members' concerns are. Councillor Pickard, I think, would like to come back.
So I'm going to speak just for myself, but I think my concern is that we have policy D2 for a reason. This proposal does not fully comply with policy D2. It is deficient in terms of at least 14 parking spaces. I think then you run the risk of, I think what people are talking about, extrapolating if we're saying it needs 51 parking spaces, 51 vehicles for the number of units provided on this site, we are expecting there to be 51 vehicles. That's what our policy says. So I think there is then a compounding issue that people are identifying where vehicles that we would normally be expected to be accommodated on site under policy D2 would therefore end up on the public highway in other areas. So I don't think it is directly a public highway concern that members are raising.
So your concern is about residential amenity, is it? Not road safety. I'm aware that the agent, Mr. Gidley, keeps signalling to speak. I have some discretion in this, but I'm going to exercise it against you, sir, because you had 3 minutes earlier on in these proceedings. And of course, if I exercise my discretion, other speakers may want to join in the debate, which we prefer not to happen. But thank you nevertheless. Are we coming to a conclusion with this? The debate seems to be around the issue mainly of parking, possibly of viability, perhaps trees. Right, Councillor Lawrence, we do need to wrap up soon because there's other applications to consider.
Okay, so yes, I think we've all got problems about this site. It's more than one problem. We would love there to be 2-bedroom flats. I'm not really worried about the 1, 2 or 2. We want it to be built on this as a brownfield site. However, there are too many issues here. So I would like to second the refusal proposed by Councillor Picker on the basis of
Anything?
policy D2 and a loss of amenity from parking and the compounding effects onto the local area. Oh, okay. I will move it then.
Councillor Harrington started.
I think we're getting slightly confused here. Councillor
But no,
Harrington
because we
proposed,
were bringing other elements in,
yeah.
so I would not be prepared to support it on anything else but parking.
Okay, sorry, I was just taking some advice there. If we are prepared to proceed to a vote, it is suggested that we can vote on the officer's recommendation, either for or against, as our conscience dictates. And then, is this correct? Yeah. So the officers recommends approval.
What we've got.
We also have several proposals for refusal. So how are we to proceed with this?
I want to clarify. Should we just go? I think
we need.
I think let's clarify it. I
Yeah.
think there's been a lot. This has been really difficult. What Councillor Picker said in D2, I think we should do that, and that we'll just vote on that if that's okay with Councillor Edwards, because I know you seconded it.
So, can I just confirm?
Okay, because there's been several proposals for refusal for different means. Are we going with Councillor Lawrence's, Councillor Picker's or Councillor Harrington's proposal to refuse?
Sorry, Chair. So from what I understand from sitting here in the midst of all of this, Councillor Harrington is saying refusal on D2. Councillor Edwards had seconded Councillor Harrington, and then the rest of us just kind of chipped in.
Right, thank you for that clarification. Although the first time I chair this committee, and it's most confusing one ever.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to check, because obviously Councillor Harrington did have on the table about affordable housing infrastructure, but has that now been quashed in that element? So you're now just on D2? Okay.
So we have a proposal from Councillor Harrington for refusal on the grounds that it doesn't comply with policy D2, which has been seconded by Councillor Edwards. I think we're there. People are nodding at me. This is a rare thing. Right, well, those for Councillor Harrington's proposal, please signify. That's unanimous. So the application is refused. Oh, sorry. So that's 8 of us, yes? Okay. Right, well, at this point, thank you, everyone. I can now return to my rightful place. And can someone go and find Councillor Sanderson, please? We'll just suspend proceedings for a couple of minutes while we play musical chairs.
Oh,
Okay.
missing one public speaker. There's one public speaker missing.
Oh, right, okay. Which one?
Oh, she could be trapped outside. That's a good point.
Right. Okay, thanks. We'll resume this meeting this evening. And now we're going to deal with application R24 1166. And
Thank you, Chair. An overloaded me tonight, for which I apologise. So this application relates to land at Bungalow Farm on Smeaton Lane in Coomfields, just north of Brinklow, and is for the construction, operation and decommissioning of a battery energy storage system, or BESS, with the associated development that you see there on the screen. Members will no doubt recall this application was referred to the October committee this year and was deferred from that meeting in order for further clarification to be provided in respect of a few detailed matters that I will come on to. I'm aware that a presentation was made at the October meeting, so I'll move through this reasonably quickly, or as quickly as possible. And if members require any more detail, I'm happy to provide that during questions to the officer. So the first couple of slides just show some existing site photos taken from the landscape visual impact assessment. The site there seen from the northeast looking across the site, and at the bottom from the northwest corner looking south. And this slide, the photo at the top looking south from the footbridge over Smite Brook, and at the bottom looking north from the slightly elevated land to the south of the proposed BESS facility. This slide shows the BESS facility and the landscaping around it, as well as the connection point to the overhead power lines which run across the northern part of the site, and the Suds Pond on the western boundary, the new woodland planting that you can see there in blocks to the east, in the blue land there, and in the form of landscaping belts to the north and the south. And slightly more detailed view of the BESS facility itself. The compound includes the substation there at the top, the battery units that are shown by the green blocks. And based on discussions at the previous meeting, members will also want to note the position of the 120,000 litre water storage tanks, which are on the north side of the compound, as well as 2 access points into the main compound itself, one at either end of the northern boundary. And then this slide just shows the proposed facility in elevation from the west, the water tanks on the left-hand side, substation in the centre, and the battery units in the right-hand half of the site there on the slightly higher ground to the south. And a few more photos. These are of the main access on Smeaton Lane, the site access viewed from Smeaton Lane itself, and then from within the site. And then similarly from outside the site, one looking east along Smeaton Lane and one looking west. And members may just want to note the verge on which the bins are positioned in the right-hand photograph, because that will become relevant shortly. And finally, this slide shows the access widening works. So the green checked area being the temporary reinforcement of verge on the north side of Smeaton Lane, and the blue area showing the minor widening works around the curb radius of the access in the highway verge, which is where those bins were positioned in the previous photo. So the key planning considerations are the principle of the development, both in terms of the use of agricultural land and the position of the site within the greenbelt, the visual and heritage impacts of the development, its impacts on landscaping and ecology, highways and transport implications, and then we'll also turn to the deferred matters from the October meeting, which were related to firefighting and the detail of the access widening. In respect of the use of best and most versatile agricultural land, the site includes grade 3A land and 3B land. Grade 3A is considered best and most versatile. The applicant therefore undertook an alternative site assessment along the length of the overhead lines, which you can see there covered by, with the overhead line is the strong blue line, and then the blue shading around it is the search area. No sequentially preferable sites that could meet the requirements of the development were found, and the development is therefore considered to be acceptable in its use of the Grade 3 agricultural land. In respect of the Greenbelt considerations, the site is located in the Greenbelt. The MPPF now provides for two situations where permission can be granted in the Greenbelt. The first is where the land meets the definition of grey belt, and the second is where very special circumstances exist which outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt. Where the site meets the definition of grey belt, very special circumstances aren't required, but it is required to meet other tests. In this case, the site is considered to be grey belt, as it does not contribute strongly to the three relevant purposes, A, B and D, that you can see there under the first bullet point, and those are purposes of including land within the green belt. In reaching that judgment, officers have had regard to the previous assessment of the parcel, which you can see the parcel is outlined in red there, and the site is kind of centre and a little bit to the north of the parcel. And that parcel was assessed as part of the most up-to-date published Greenbelt Review. And we've also had regard to the guidance for assessing grey belt contained within National Planning Practice Guidance. And I can provide more detail on that question should members wish in respect of our assessment that it is grey belt. As the site is considered grey belt, an assessment has been made as to whether it meets the other tests, which you can see there in bullet points 2, 3 and 4 on the slide. The development would not fundamentally undermine the purposes of the remaining green belt. There is acknowledged demonstrable need for battery storage infrastructure, as evidenced by several recent appeal decisions, and the development is in a sustainable location relative to its nature. And on that basis, the proposal accords with the MPPF and is acceptable in terms of national and local greenbelt policy. In terms of visual and heritage impacts of the development, the site is located at the northern end of the field, close to existing buildings. The height of the buildings on site, the proposed buildings, is relatively limited. And immediate views from the public footpath are screened by existing boundary hedging. The combination of screening, the limited height of the development and its location close to existing buildings means it's not considered to have any significant harmful impact on the visual amenity of the area, and its distance from designated and non-designated heritage assets. You can see there the yellow dot shows the bridge over Smite Brook, and then further south in Brinklow itself, the conservation area and various listed buildings shown in green. But it's not considered that it has any significant impact on the setting of those heritage assets. And it's also worth noting, both in terms of its landscape impact and its heritage impact, that the permission being sought is for a temporary, although long-term, 40-year period. As far as landscaping and ecology is concerned, the existing boundary planting around the site would be supplemented, so it would be retained and supplemented by significant additional proposed planting in the form of landscape belts and hedges around the compound. the new planting would both assist in the screening of the development and provide for a significant biodiversity enhancement, which would be secured in the long term via a Section 106 agreement. And just worth noting, there are no objections from the county ecologist or the council's trees officer, and the provision of the biodiversity enhancement and the landscaping would be secured as part of the permission. Most of the traffic associated with the site would be during the construction of the BESS, with very little during the operational phase, based on additional information submitted in respect of construction details, as well as a road safety audit, construction traffic management plan, and the scheme to make minor alterations to the highway. The local highways authority has confirmed it has no objection to the proposed development on the grounds of highway safety or its transport implications. Both the management plan and the scheme to widen the highway are secured by the proposed conditions. So turning now to the deferred matters, the October Planning Committee meeting requested clarification on the matters of the water supply for firefighting, the potential need for 2 points of access from the highway, and further details relating to the access widening on Smeaton Lane. Following the October meeting, both the applicant's fire advisors and I have independently liaised with Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service in respect of water provision and the question of a second access. In respect of water provision, the applicant has confirmed to the council that the 2 120,000 litre water tanks are provided to enable firefighting. They've also confirmed that these will be filled by tanker and that there is no reliance on a main supply of water to the site. I've personally discussed this point with the Fire Protection Manager at Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service, who has confirmed that this would be an acceptable way of providing water for firefighting. And that would be secured by Condition 9 on the draft notice, which is the condition originally requested by the Fire and Rescue Service in its consultation response. On the point of the requirement for a second access, Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service has advised that it interprets the National Fire Chief's recommendation as referring to 2 points of access from the highway. However, it has expressly confirmed that the provision of a second access is not mandatory and is, and I quote, merely a recommendation, and that while an additional access would make firefighting easier, it is not a requirement. It has confirmed that it has no objection to the development as proposed, subject to the condition regarding water provision, and it has confirmed that it considers building regulations will be met by the provision of one compliant access route. In any event, building regulations are separate to planning permission and their requirements are not overridden by the granting of permission. In summary, Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service, which is the statutory consultee on fire safety and has the expertise to advise on matters of fire safety, finds the scheme acceptable, and there are therefore no concerns in respect of fire safety. In respect to the proposed access widening, a scheme has been provided to and agreed by the local highways authority. That's on the slide that I showed you previously. The submitted plan shows that the access works are within the highway. However, in any event, the applicant has confirmed that they have agreed access rights with a freehold owner and that they've served all necessary notices under Article 13 of the Development Management Procedure Order. There is therefore no impediment to the granting of permission, subject to the condition requiring the highways works. The application is considered acceptable in respect of all of the matters that you can see there. And just as a reminder to members, it would be granted for a period of 40 years and its removal is secured by Condition 17. In respect to the planning balance, the benefits of the scheme are that it will provide battery storage infrastructure to support national aims to decarbonise the energy system, contribute to net zero targets and tackle the climate emergency. It will deliver biodiversity net gains, which are significant, and economic benefits via investment in the borough and construction jobs. The site meets the definition of grey belt and the development is acceptable in this location. Previous deferred matters have been addressed and there are no identified harms from the proposal. The recommendation before you is therefore to approve the application subject to the conditions set out in the draft decision and to the completion of a Section 106 agreement securing habitat management and monitoring over a 30-year period. The application will also be referred to the Government's Planning Casework Unit, and we request that you delegate authority to the Chief Officer to make minor amendments to the conditions and the detailed terms of the legal agreement as necessary. And I'm happy to take questions you may have in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Can I call on John Reid from Binklow Parish Council? If you all 3 minutes, please.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm hopefully not going to speak from the pre-written speech. I just want to say to you that the people of Brinklow and those of Coombe Fields, whom I also represent, are very afraid that this proposal will not turn out to be what is actually written on paper. We know, I'm afraid, from history of the owner of this site that he will push planning permissions to the very limit. And I've personally been trying to get through the Environmental Department at Rugby Borough Council for about 2.5 years. I've been trying to get them to check that planning permissions that he had in place have not been exceeded. And for some reason you keep dropping away from it. And we've had a push in the last 3 or 4 months, and we still haven't got to a situation where anybody's been to see Mr. Milne and understood that what's going on his farm is in fact subject of planning. Because the last guy we ever talked about, one of your employees, a guy called Hitesh Tozar, who's no longer with you, he wrote me an email some time ago saying Mr. Milne does not repair cars on this site. And yet if you go on Google Earth, it says there's a BMW specialist working there. There's also 2 paint shops and other things, and a massage parlour. And I would say the massage parlour is when you've got a bad back. We are very much afraid that if you agree this proposal and it goes ahead, that Mr. Milne will want to cover the remainder of his agricultural land with solar panels. One thing that we would be absolutely against, more derogation of the green belt. It's gone awful quiet.
Can I ask Stuart Hammond, the agent, to speak on this one?
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. My name is Stuart Hammond. I've spoken here before. As you can see, I've gone to lengths to address all of your deferral points. I'm robustly engaged with the Fire and Rescue Service, address the point of the water infrastructure which was raised, confirm that all of the notifications have been served, all the works on the highways are on the highways land themselves. In terms of access, we've engaged Green Fire Solutions, who are ex-fire chiefs. They are objective in this matter. They've seen horrendous things. They are not willing to let this pass, and that's why we use them, because they talk to fire brigades. I refer you to Appendix 2 of the further papers. It confirms that there's no objection subject to building regulations. Building regulations will be met. I don't want to reiterate what the officer said. I think it's clear. I think it's a confident recommendation to approve. In terms of addressing what Mr. Reid said, the issues with the landowner are not the issues with this scheme at all. They're not material in determination. In terms of our agreement with the landowner, it's for this development. This development is backed by private equity. That type of money does not enable us to mess around. We are bound by the conditions and we are bound by any legal agreement, and we will adhere to them. This is our name, not the landowner's name. In terms of the solar panels, the point of connection is agreed, and the capacity is for the best and best only. If one was to bring forward a solar panel scheme, that would have to start with the capacity being in the network, and that simply isn't the case here. We're not seeking to deliver solar panels, we're seeking to deliver the best. The same best that helps provide a resilient energy network to meet the climate emergency that's been confirmed by the government, the climate emergency that's been confirmed by Rugby Borough Council, and aligned with policies in your development plan, as well as the neighbourhood plan, I think it's E8, specifically on renewable energy. I therefore reiterate that all matters of deferral have been addressed. The application has recommendation for approval. There are significant public benefits here, and the points that the Chair has raised, the Chair of Brinklow Parish Council, I would ask you to investigate them, but they're not going to happen on our application. We will adhere to the conditions and we will adhere to the legal agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through you. I think, yes, I would just advise members that they need to assess the application that's in front of them. There's no suggestion at this stage that solar panels would come forward, and you've heard what the agents had to say about capacity. Any future application for such would be assessed on its merits, and we're not here to assess that at the moment. I understand the parish's concerns, but the scheme before you is a battery energy storage system, and that's what you would be giving approval for tonight, and only that.
Are there any technical points from the councillors? Councillor Lawrence.
This is the first time I've seen this. I wasn't here the last planning committee. This has been done for net zero. There's looking at what's been constructed. There's a lot of concrete going in there. So are there any conditions applied to the actual construction and reducing the amount of CO2 that's been put into the concrete, cement and the construction of the site?
There's no condition specifically relating to that matter. I would say there is a condition for the requirement for a decommissioning plan, which would obviously deal with the back end of that issue, so where that how that concrete is dealt with once it's no longer required. Head of Planning advises me that there are informatives that we can put on around those matters. We wouldn't normally seek to condition them, but happy to add informatives if members would find that gave them some comfort.
Thank you. Councillor Picker.
Right. Thank you again for the report, which addressed most of my concerns from the previous committee. I just want to really drill down on this green belt, grey belt issue, and I think it's probably wider than this specific application, so apologies if I'm about to put you on the spot. My understanding is that the grey belt that's been dreamt up by the government applies on a site-by-site basis. So we're not, if we approve this evening, is it then in perpetuity grey belt rather than green belt? Because obviously this is a temporary permission. So at the end of this permission's lifespan, does it then go back to being in the green belt, or does it stay as grey belt? And I appreciate that might be beyond the scope of this meeting.
Yeah, worrying about what is going to happen in 40 years feels like a difficult thing. I would say, on your question generally, yes, grey belt was included within the latest update to the National Planning Policy Framework. The MPPF provides for grey belt to be designated as part of local plans, so there is a plan-making element to the designation of grey belt. There is also a requirement that grey belt be considered as part of individual planning applications where it's not already been designated as grey belt. In this case, we are talking just about the application site. We're not really considering whether any surrounding land is grey belt or not. We only have to consider the application site. As I said, I can go into more detail about how we came to that judgment if you like, but I don't think that's your question. I think I've gone off.
Sorry.
I'm on now. Yeah. Yeah, so we've made the assessment on the basis of this site, not any surrounding land. As I said, as part of the presentation, once you've decided that it is grey belt, it then has to meet other tests as well. So just being designated grey belt doesn't mean that there are suddenly no other restrictions on it. You have to consider the impact of the development on the wider green belt and the purposes of it across the board. You also have to consider the sustainability of the location relative to the development that's being proposed, and whether there is a need for the development itself, and we've gone through that process. Whether it would revert back to being green belt as opposed to grey belt in the future, I think I'm satisfied to say I think enough may change in the next 40 years that we might not have to worry about that, but I appreciate I'm sitting on the fence with that.
Just to point on, I know we hit upon the subject at the last time this application came before us, and that is the issue of flooding. Could you just remind us what the mitigation measures are for dealing with water runoff, especially at times with excessive rain?
Yes, there is a strategy for dealing with that via discharge so semi-permeable drainage into a suds pond, and that has there is the ability within that system to shut off that, which you would do if, say, you were firefighting on the site and you didn't want the water to just leach out into the wider network. So that can be contained, and then the water would be in normal operation directed towards the suds pond that I showed members on the slide. And then into the drainage network.
Sorry, could I just come back? Because you probably haven't realised that Smeaton Lane, there's a convergence of two streams. One of them is the Smite Brook, and in times of heavy rain, Smeaton Lane is underwater. Any hard standing that's going to have, accumulate so much rain that's going to impact on properties, that's going to be a bit of an issue.
Yeah, I think the officers answered your point to the best of his ability. I now want to move this into general debate in terms of the overall application. Right, who wants to start on the application?
Okay. So obviously I was one of the ones involved in deferring this, and I think it was correct to do so because we seem to have technical documents at the time that were conflicting with one another in regards to particularly the fire risk. I am content that that has been alleviated. I still have reservations about the existence of grey belt and how that actually works. However, that's beyond the scope of this particular application, which fundamentally does comply with all the relevant policies. I appreciate the comments from the speaker regarding the landowner, but again, those aren't relevant to the decision we have to make today. However, I think if it could be noted that perhaps enforcement needs to go and have another look. Thank you, Richard. So I'm content to move this for approval in line with the officer's recommendations.
Could I second that, but also add an informative about green methods construction?
I'm happy to accept.
And we would leave it to the officers to word that.
Stole my thunder. Yeah, I mean, I was the original person to defer it, and the information has come back now, which is great. So we know what's going on now. So I'm happy to approve as well.
Yeah, well, I'm not entirely happy with this, Chair, as you probably might have gathered. I know Councillor John Reid, the Chairman of Brinklow Parish Council, is coming along, but he's not representing the Parish Council. He's representing the whole of the community, and they have a voice. And I think this will have a massive impact on on the local people, especially people living close by, and I've witnessed with my own eyes issues down there. And this.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Gillis, are you moving refusal or what?
No, because I can see that I'm not going to get very far with that. So I'll leave it at that, but I would like to think that the point that Councillor Picker raised about the other issues on that premises, the officers will get back and copy in ward councillors.
That's a matter of enforcement, and our officers already indicated that will be done.
It was raised at the last meeting, and I would like to think we'd got something to feed back on to the members of the community.
Those in favour? Those against? Thank you, that matter is carried. Any abstentions? Nope, that matter is carried. Into a 5-bedroom dwelling.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the proposed change of use of the former public house, the King's House, previously known as the Three Horseshoe Public House within Hightown, Princethorpe, to a 5-bedroom dwelling. This application has been called in by Councillor Keeling on the grounds of the public house being a community asset and because more than 15 letters of objection from households residing in the locality the application site have been received. The application site is a Part 2 and 3-storey detached property located within the rural village of Princethorpe. The building was previously used as a public house and was originally 3 buildings built in the 18th century. The site is approximately 0.67 acres and consists of the former public house, a garden to the west and a car park to the south. The operational use of the building as a public house has ceased. As you can see from the images, the top left, the view is from the outside of the application site, from the Oxford Road. The picture to the top right is the view from outside the site, adjacent to the row of terrace houses known as Hightown to the east. And the bottom picture is the view from inside the site, the car park and the public house. To the left is a large garden area. Princethorpe is a rural village made up of a mix of different house types which generally follow a network of highways through the village in a linear format. The village does not have a formal centre. Outside of the village boundary is the green belt. The application site is bounded by the Oxford Road, Rugby Road and Foss Way. To the south east is a small terrace of properties, and to the north several larger detached properties. The site is approximately 7 miles southwest of the town of Rugby and 6 miles northeast of the town of Leamington Spa. The public house is not registered as an asset of community value. Several technical quantities were consulted: the Rugby Environmental Health Department, the Landscape Officer and Work Services, provided no response, and Warwickshire County Council and the Highways Department provided a response of no objection. The Prince-Thorpe Parish Council objected to the change of use, and Councillor Keeling called in the application. More than 15 neighbours objected to the change of use. The parish's main concerns are regarding the loss of community asset and the development not complying with policy HS3. The neighbours' main concerns were the loss of a community asset, Prince-Thorpe having no other community facilities and no other suitable alternative similar venues. There was also letters of support for the application. It is considered that the principal development is acceptable. Prince-Thorpe is a rural village where development will be permitted within existing boundaries where national policy permits. Therefore, it is considered that the application accords with policy GP2 of the local plan, providing all planning matters have been properly addressed. Policy GP3 of the local plan advises that proposals that reuse and adapt existing buildings in rural areas will be permitted, providing it adheres to the criteria suggested within the policy. The building is of permanent and substantial construction. It does not require extensive rebuilding, and the nature and location makes it suitable for reuse. Policy HS3 of the local plan states proposals that would result in a significant or total loss of a site and or premises currently or last used for a local shop, post office, public house, community or cultural facility, or other service that contributes towards the sustainability of a local settlement or the urban area will not be permitted unless there is no alternative provision. Unless there is an alternative provision or there is no reasonable prospect to the existing use being retained. Although the applicant has provided a supporting statement which details 40 existing public houses, restaurants and other food and drink venues within close distance to the application site, it was considered that the evidence provided did not demonstrate that the application meets the first exception, that alternative provision is accessible to the residents and visitors to Prince-Thorpe. It was also considered that the second criteria had not been satisfactorily demonstrated, that the public house was unviable as demonstrated by a viability assessment, and all reasonable efforts to secure suitable alternative business or community reuse has been made for a minimum of 12 months. At the request of the council, the agent has provided a viability report by the WTS property consultants. The viability report advises there is a substantial amount of licensed competition in the local area. There are 18 public houses within a circa 5-mile radius. Nationally, the service sector has found it to be more difficult due to market factors, including the rise in the national minimum wage and national insurance contributions. The public house has seen a substantial decline due to the change in consumer social habits, cost of living, a transient population and an increase in sales of alcohol at the supermarket. On a positive note, when a public house closes, the business will generally transfer to other nearby public houses. Due to the location, the King's House is a destination public house. It has a checkered trading history, including 4 tenants over a 5-year period. The public house has been marketed for rental on several public house relevant websites, and with a to-let board outside the property, no rental offers were received. The public house advertised for freehold marketing. There were 14 viewings. 3 parties made an offer with no funded offers being put forward for a public house use. The report advises that the tenant would be unable to obtain a reasonable standard of living running the business, and the landlord is also unable to obtain a sufficient return by leasing the property to a tenant to make it commercially viable. The report has been assessed by our economic development manager, who concluded that the report offers a thorough and considered analysis of the property in context of its use, location and current market conditions. The report concludes that the King's House is not viable as a public house, and the principal reasons are as follows. The pub's profitability is very limited, and it is not a viable business for a landlord, tenant or owner-occupier. The property has had comprehensive marketing campaigns on a leasehold and freehold basis, and no funded offers were received for the pub use. The extensive marketing campaigns demonstrated that there is no demand for the public house use. The loss of this pub would not be detrimental to the local area due to the vast amount of other public houses located nearby. It should be noted that the public house is only marketed for a period of 9 months. However, the LPA considered the interest for the public house was low, and the likelihood is that the additional 3 months would not result in continuation of the current use. The local community were in favour of retaining the public house as a public house or for another community use. However, there was no formal offers to purchase the public house, continued the use as a public house or as an alternative community use. Other considerations. Regarding design, the proposed alterations are minimal, with the main alterations being internal. The property will retain its existing character and appearance. As the property has been extended and altered in the past, condition 6 will be included to prevent additional extensions, roof enlargements and porches being added. In relation to the protection of the neighbourhood properties, the external fenestration remains the same. There are no new extensions or alterations, therefore there will be little additional impact on the neighbours' properties regarding loss of sunlight, daylight and loss of privacy and overlooking. Warwickshire County Council Highways have been consulted and provided a response of no objection. Highways have requested a condition 3, to prevent gates being positioned adjacent to the carriageway. Warwickshire County Council Ecology have been consulted and have provided a response of no objection. Ecology have requested for informative notes to be included within the decision notice regarding the protection of bats and nesting birds. The Tree and Landscaping Officer has been consulted and provided no response to the change of use. It is recognised that the existing mature trees to the northern boundary will remain. Conditions will be included for the property to provide broadband and mobile internet and limit the amount of water used. That's conditions 4 and 5. In conclusion, the proposed development is acceptable in principle. Due to the minimal changes, it's satisfactory in terms of design and will not adversely affect the amenities of neighbouring properties. The proposed use of the building as dwelling will not have an adverse impact on highway safety and will provide suitable on-site parking provision. Additionally, there will not be an adverse impact on landscaping or protected species and biodiversity. The application also accords with the National Planning Policy Framework and the local plan. The recommendation is that this development be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Rebecca Ferguson to come forward.
Princethorpe Parish Council object to the planning application R250486 on the following grounds. 1. This would be a loss of a historic 18th century community asset that residents are desperate to see open again. 2. Planning policy HS3 and NPPF is against allowing change of use of a pub unless all alternatives are exhausted. 3. The following points contravene planning policy HS3. 1. No formal assessments of viability of change of community use have been carried out. 2. The owners have not considered alternative solutions as required. 3. The community has not had the opportunity to consider alternative solutions. Princethorpe Parish Council is passionate about keeping this vital community asset running for the benefit of residents. The pub is the only community meeting place left in the village, and the well-being of the residents would be massively impacted if it were to close permanently. Planning policy requires 1. The existing use must be proven unviable, and 2. All reasonable efforts must have been made to secure alternative business or community reuse for at least 12 months. The Parish Council contends neither requirement has been met. The submitted viability assessment focuses solely on the pub's ability to operate as a commercial business. It fails to consider its viability as a community pub, which does not need to generate profit for a private owner and can operate on a substantial not-for-profit basis. It also omits the significant impact of poor management and minimal marketing undertaken by the previous tenants, which contributed to reduced trade. When the Parish Council previously applied for an asset of community value listing for the Three Horseshoes, it was assumed the pub was simply between owners. Rugby Borough Council assumed it was not viable as a business as it was closed at the time, and on this basis, the ACV application was refused. However, the viability assessment now submitted demonstrates the site would be viable as a community-run pub, and it should not be considered unviable just because it was closed. For these reasons, the Parish Council believes the original ACV refusal was incorrect, as a meaningful viability assessment was neither carried out nor considered. In conclusion, residents of Princethorpe strongly value the Three Horseshoes and wish to see it retained at the heart of the village. Losing this historic pub would cause lasting harm to the character of the village and to community life. Additionally, there is fear by residents of the property becoming some type of HMO development. We therefore request the opportunity to undertake a full and meaningful viability assessment on the site as a community pub and community centre capable of providing a wide range of services. If this is not granted, Princethorpe Parish Council requests some restrictions are placed on the property by Rugby Borough Council to prevent an HMO and an alternative social hub is provided. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I call on Mark Mirams, the agent, to respond?
Thank you very much. I think it's very important that the whole of the relevant local planning policies are read, including all the limbs to that policy and the either-or points in that policy. I know everyone doesn't like the loss of a public house. I'm actually a member of Camera myself, so I do enjoy a real ale and I do enjoy pubs. But you need to look at the reality. It's clear and it's within the application submission documents. It's not commercially viable as a pub or any other commercial use. It was marketed, and as explained on page 115 of the case officer's report. There's 2 comprehensive, full and open marketing campaigns that were carried out. Stonegate Group has extensive knowledge and experience of existing pubs. They tried and failed to get any interest in the site. It was a destination pub. It was used for mainly restaurants. It's had 4 tenants within the last 5 years, and they all failed to make a living out of this site. The parish tried and failed to get the site registered as an asset of community value. There was no formal offers that were received to purchase or run the site as a pub or any other community facility or any other commercial use. The parish sort of suggests different ideas that are completely different, and they have admitted in some of their comments that it's not actually viable as a pub. There is a housing need, and that's something else that's quite important. This would be a family house. The application before you needs to be decided on its merits and in accordance with adopted local and national planning policies. It's a change of use to a dwelling. The applicant did originally submit a scheme for restaurants. I had discussions with them, but they weren't viable either. There were a number of planning policy constraints around that. It wasn't practical and it wasn't progressed. The idea of warm hubs or community hubs has been suggested, but it wasn't stated from the very beginning when this pub was up for sale. The ideas from the parish council, they're not really a continuation of an existing or previous use. They weren't ever presented as a feasible or viable use. It's a reactive idea rather than a viable, feasible proposal. It's $800,000 approximately to actually repair the damaged building at the moment, and it costs an awful lot more to actually run it as a viable community asset. The parish has still got a former garage site. There's no community facility that's ever been proposed there. There are other facilities that can be used as community facilities, which provide other alternatives. There's no, unless there's some sort of unmet community need for this building, which is now privately owned, then it's impossible and it can't be justified. It needs to be converted into a suitable family dwelling. Thank you.
The question of a community asset has been raised. I would like to get up to the legal response in terms of what is and what is not a community asset, whether it's registered or not. Can I ask our legal officer?
Yeah, the application predates me, but there was an application made, I understand, in July 2023 that wasn't accepted. And I understand that at the time, one of the reasons for it not being accepted was that the parish had not provided a plan of how it could be operated as a community hub. Since then, the property has been sold, and normally, in terms of an application for an asset to become considered as an asset of community value, if the application is approved, then a charge is placed on that property so that should it come up for sale at any point, then the community has a period of time to gather the funds and put forward a proposal. Currently, it's not got that charge on the property, and because of that, tonight we're looking at an application for change of use.
Thank you. Technical questions for the officers. Councillor Gillies.
Just one, and that was surrounding the issue of an asset of community value. Because in discussions, I have been told that Rugby Borough Council don't have a policy on asset of community values. They don't have one. I know that they're working on one at the moment, which will be coming before councillors. So it's quite possible that when that decision was made, it wasn't made in the right way. Could someone confirm that, please?
It's true that the council is currently reviewing a policy and is due to bring a report to the cabinet in the new year. I wasn't employed by the council in 2023. I do know that there is legislation that stands, and I know that the legislation was complied with. There is an application form on the website, the council's website, for applicants to apply for asset of community value status. It is helpful to have, would be helpful to have a current policy, which is what the officers are working on currently and are bringing a report to Cabinet.
Thank you. Any other technical points? The picker.
Yeah, so obviously we've got condition 6, which relates to, as I understand it, changes to the fabric of the building, so extensions and such forth in terms of permitted development rights. I just want to go back to one of the comments made by one of the speakers about the use. So this is turning it into a dwelling house, is the application. Is it possible to either have a condition or an informative saying that we view it as only appropriate as a dwelling house to address some of the concerns that have been raised by residents in the report and elsewhere?
Through you, Chair. We did receive neighbour concerns regarding whether the property would be turned into a HMO, and I think that was the main issue. Currently under legislation, it would be possible for the property to go to a 6-person HMO. When you consider that it could be a 5-bedroom dwelling house, if it went to a 6-person HMO, the likelihood is that it wouldn't be intensify the use beyond what's probably already there. If it went to a HMO sui generis use where there is more than 6 people, then it would require planning application, and then it would be considered on its own merits. So I think it would be, in theory, when we look at what we can put conditions on for, I think it would be unreasonable, because how would we distinguish between when we put that condition on, and would it be fair to put it on this application and not on, for example, all the other applications that are, say, 5-bedroom houses? So I think it's covered by the legislation, I think. Does that help?
Any other points, or can we move into debate? Okay, we'll move into debate.
We have a policy to protect the community and to keep things like local pubs. But all the way through this, it reads as there's 18 within 5 miles? Well, there's not many footpaths outside of Princethorpe. You have to, if you're going to walk anywhere, I wouldn't, knowing the roads around there. So you're getting into cars. So then it sort of begs the question, why do we have a policy that says we want to protect the last remaining pub? But by its very definition, if you lose that last remaining pub, people are going to probably have to drive to another village, which sort of defeats the purpose of having a community pub. It's, you know, I know that there's all sorts of issues around viability has been a big thing this evening, and around running businesses. But I think there could have been more done on this to look at it as a more consultation with the parish and more talking to the community about, could this be a community asset? Could you work with the community? You know, there is nowhere else in Princethorpe as a community space. The parish council meetings are held in the primary school late at night, you know, while the cleaner's going round. It's not as if they've got lots of local community space that they can use. The garage sites, Rugby Borough Council owned. They're not, the parish council don't own them. So I just think it's a shame that we've got a policy that says we're going to protect local pubs and shops in small villages, and yet at the same time we're then, oh, it's fine, you can get in the car to go to the pub, which sort of, I don't know. It just makes me quite sad, this one.
Well, yes, what we've got to realise, when the pub's gone, it's gone forever. Never come back. Never, ever, ever come back. And of course, I've got to declare a bit of an interest here because, well, I'm just coming on to that. but when Sue and Harry Morton sold the Denby Arms at Monk's Kirby, they bought the Three Horseshoes at Princethorpe, and they turned that into a gold mine. They knew exactly how to run the business. They knew exactly what the customers wanted. And they had rooms upstairs to let, you see, that boosted viability. I've not heard anything of that, of the speakers. That sort of thing boosts viability. And as the parish chair of Paleton, we're fighting to open our village pub again, because we bought it. And we've got moving heaven and earth to open that place as a multifunctional place where the whole of the community can come together, like they used to in the years gone by. And I don't like the idea of changing this into a house. I like to think that every effort can be made, and this is where councillors need to come together now to support the possibility of the parish council buying it. And so I'm going to move refusal.
Just a quick reminder on that, Councillor Gillius, is we can only determine the planning application that is before us, not our wish lists.
I think that's what I was doing.
Paul, yeah, through you, Chair. If I could just read the part of the policy, HS3, which is relevant, I think, to the application. There's two parts to it, and it doesn't say and, it says or. So the part I'll read is, it says, there's no reasonable prospect of retention of the existing use as it is unviable as demonstrated by a viability assessment, and all reasonable efforts to secure suitable alternative business or community reuse has been made for a minimum of 12 months or a period agreed by the local planning authority prior to the application submission. So we asked for the viability report. The viability report came in, and this is maybe a bit more comprehensive than what was put in my report, but it said that there was a total of 14 viewings within the period of 9 months. So 4 offers were made from 3 parties. So party 1 is the current owner. So party 2 was an unconditional offer, but that was they think it was again going to be used for residential use, and the third one as well for residential use. There was no party came in to say that they wished to turn it into or reuse it as a pub or use it as a different community use. So I just wanted to maybe just clarify that. I think as well, generally, and the policy does say 12 months, in 9 months there's 14 people, so you're looking, generously saying there was 2 people a month viewing the property, so just to put it, to be a bit more comprehensive on it.
Any other speakers before we move to the vote?
I think we would all be sorry to see a pub go, as I think one or two councillors do frequent pubs from time to time. But, I mean, we have to move into the 21st century. The pub that we remember isn't what's there now. What's there now is a building that's at risk of becoming a blight on the village because no viable use can be found for it, and hasn't been. And it was originally 3 dwelling houses. It was turned into a pub. Going back to being a dwelling house is not necessarily a bad thing if you prevent a situation where we've got a deteriorating building at the heart of the village. I think one of the speakers stated it required an investment of £800,000 to bring it up to spec as a public house. That's not viable either. I don't think any tenant would want to go in with that sort of cost hanging over them. And certainly, the pub chains that exist at the moment, they wouldn't be prepared to put that level of investment in because the return they would get, based on the evidence that we've got, 5 landlords in 4 years, it suggests that it wouldn't work. It's not a go at all. And this sadly, is what happens.
Councillor Simpson-Vince.
I think we're sort of, there's almost 2 different things going on here. There's the commercial side of it, but there's also, as the parish council was saying, the community side of it. There are community pubs, as Councillor Gillies was talking about, where communities get together and buy the pub. I remember one opening in Walcott, just across into Leicestershire, that's a community pub that was just, the whole village came together, bought it, opened it, ran it, and it's been very successful. So it can happen, and I just think we've got policy HS3 here. Why have we got it if we're not going to try and protect local community assets? I'm going to second Councillor Gillies on the basis of it's contrary to policy HS3.
I think just no, I'm not. I was actually going to. So essentially, it's turning on HS3 and the community use side of things. I think what would help me in the decision-making process is whether there was reasonable opportunity for the parish council to intervene and buy it, either in conjunction with the previous owner or in the process that the building went through and clearly failed as a commercial asset. Because I don't think there's any debate on that front on the basis of the officer's report. Because I think where we should act as a backstop is if that policy hasn't been complied with. But where I am slightly more reticent to act is if the parish council were given that opportunity and were either unable or unwilling to meet it, in which case we can't then use HS3 as a reason to refuse, in my mind. So I'd appreciate some clarity on exactly how that chain of events unfolded.
Through you, Chair, and I'll let the case officer speak as well. Obviously, as mentioned, this site did go through a series of marketing campaigns, and I'm sorry, Councillor Speaker.
It's specifically on the opportunities presented to the parish council under HS3 in order to create it as a. I appreciate we've had a thorough marketing campaign as a pub, but if we're choosing to utilise HS3, I want to understand how that was applied in terms of the asset of community value.
I mean, the assets of community value are an entirely separate process to the planning process. The policy specifically states that there's no reasonable prospect for retention of existing use, as is unviable as demonstrated by a viability assessment and reasonable efforts to secure suitable alternative business or community reuse. Now, obviously, it doesn't have to, it's not an and, so it's an or, it's a policy. So therefore, they've submitted a viability assessment. Obviously, the parish did try and attempt to put an application for an asset of community value. I understand, obviously, our legal colleague can clarify, but I understand that the council hadn't at that time seen any compelling evidence regarding the aspirations of how the community and Prince Philip Parish Council in particular would use the Three Horseshoes pub if it came forward. And the council again hadn't then also seen compelling evidence of how that would then also be in the interest and social interests and well-being of the local community. And obviously that was part of the reason why that I understand that nomination was turned down. So, yeah, looking at policy HS3, then obviously they have satisfied the bit with regards to the viability assessment. Obviously it's now in the hands of a new owner. I think it would be outside our remit as a planning committee to try and see whether or not a private sale or agreement could be reached between a landowner and a parish council, even if the application was turned down on policy HS3, because that is obviously a private matter between those parties, and we can't obviously govern that. It's. I think even as officers, we don't. It's always a tough call when community facilities are sort of lost, and particularly those, I think, that are sort of public houses that obviously have served a function. It clearly was, a thriving business years ago, but obviously we are where we are now, and unfortunately this is the application before us, and we're obviously considering it against policy.
Cool.
So the property was marketed for 450,000, so it's quite a considerable amount, I think. In terms of as stated in the report, that the property went up for sale, the parish had an opportunity to purchase, or somebody to purchase it as a community asset, and that didn't happen. So there's nothing to say that will happen now. It didn't happen at the time. So, like I say, somebody's purchased it. I suppose they've purchased it in good faith, and like I said, I don't think it may not become a community asset. We've got no guarantee on that, so I think that needs to be considered.
What you're voting on is the record. I'll try again. What you're voting on is the recommendation on the report on whether you're for or against it, or if there's some magic reason for deferral, then that's where we will be. We cannot vote on what it may or may not become, only what is on the application before you.
Sorry, I might be mistaken. Legilius did a motion to refuse.
Councillor Gillis has put forward a proposal that it should be refused, and that will be part of the vote. Just to keep you all up to speed, Councillor Simpson-Vince seconded Councillor Gillis's proposal for refusal. So what we will now be voting on is the officer's recommendation as proposed.
Sorry, no, we're voting on unless someone else puts anything else forward, what I believe what we're voting for is the first and a seconder to refuse.
Yeah.
It's not the officer.
At the moment, we have a proposition to vote for or against to offer refusal. Do we have a proposer for approval? Councillor Freeman? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Thomas? Thank you. Right, so now how
Sorry, Chair. I put a proposal to refuse it, and we had a seconder. That should go to the vote. Nothing else. That should go to the vote.
We will hear the reason. We'll have the vote on refusal first. One, two, three, four. Those against, please show. Reason for refusal is lost. So we're therefore going with approval. You want me to have another vote on approval?
No, it should be the same.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's been
Yeah.
approved.
That application has been approved.
Just a point of clarification, do we not need to vote on an approval?
Yes.
Can
Yeah,
do
we need to go
if
through
we,
that process, yeah.
if you would like that to
No,
happen.
I think we need to go through that process.
Right.
Yeah.
All
now with
those.
Now with officer's recommendation.
All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, can you please show? Thank you.
And those against?
And those against?
Any abstentions?
Any abstentions? Thank you. Advance notice of site visits. Have we, Ed, had any requests for a site visit?
None further, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No, did. Thank you.